So, hello, good afternoon. My name is Mike Steffen. I am an educational representative for the Palen Music Center here in the Kansas City area. Palen Music has 8 locations in the Midwest, Missouri, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. We serve hundreds and hundreds of programs across that area, and one of the ways we've been reaching out to our directors and beyond during this time is by hosting sessions like this. And we've been bringing together educators and performers and folks from all over across the music industry to just share ideas with one another to help lift us all up. So I'm very, very happy that you guys are all joining us here today. We've got Jan Gippo with us on the call. Jan is the retired piccolo player and retired flute and piccolo from the St. Louis Symphony. I think we might have just lost him. He said that he might get bumped off from time to time. So I don't see him on here anywhere. Let me make sure we can get him back on. Well, I'll text him and we'll make sure he's getting back on. My apologies for that.
Can you?
Are you on? Are you on there still, Jan? Oh, there you are. Good. Okay. Sorry. I thought we'd lost you somehow. Okay. He's still on mute. There you go. All right. So, Jan, we got you. We're good to go. So Jan was the flute and piccolo player with the St. Louis Symphony for, we said 38 years is what we decided, right, Jan?
Yeah.
38 years. He had over 35 works commissioned for the piccolo and really kind of helped the piccolo become a solo artist or a soloistic instrument, whereas before it was relegated to the sidelines. He wrote the book, The Complete Piccolo, which we are going to reference here with some fingering charts a little later. And we're just excited to have him here. He's going to be talking about a few different things along the way, but I'm going to set up the chat in a way where you can send me messages and then I will filter those to him. So if there's any questions you want to ask along the way, please feel free to drop those in the chat. And I'll also put my phone number there if you'd like to reach out to me and send the text for your questions or whatever. So anyway, without any further ado, Jan Gippo, tell us a little bit more about yourself and welcome to our session today.
Well, thank you very much. And may I thank every one of the participants for thinking so much about the piccolo and wanting to hear what I have to say about it. I'm very honored and I thank you all very much. I went to the New England Conservatory starting in 1966 and I graduated with an applied degree in flute and an applied degree in wind ensemble conducting from Frank Battisti. But in my last year, second year of my master's degree, there was an opening in St. Louis. I took the audition. This is a very thumbnail sketch. I won the audition in February of '71 and went and started playing in March of '71. And I guess first of all, I was scared to death when I first started, of course, and I wondered, what am I doing here? I mean, that always happens. I remember going home to my wife and saying, I don't belong here. And then, of course, that went away because of the excitement of playing, and I knew I could perform. But that summer, the St. Louis Arch and Arch Grounds, which is now a national park, was being dedicated, and the St. Louis Symphony went there, and we played Beethoven's Ninth. And of course, the march in the fourth movement of the Ninth, where the piccolo starts it out with the percussion and plays an 8-bar measure, and then goes from a middle D to a ledger line D and does the same thing. When we rehearsed it, Walter Susskind, in his wonderful British accent said, Jan, I think it's a D, not a C sharp. And at that point, I understood that there were some things about the piccolo I didn't understand and that I better find out about. That started me on the path to trying to find out why everyone hated the piccolo. And I think I found out why. And so I started writing articles for Flute Talk magazine, and the reason I started was to make sure that people would buy the right instruments. First two things were on selecting of instruments, and the third article, which I think came out in 75 or 78 or something like that, when it first came out, was the fingering chart. And we'll get into that more if you ask questions about it. But I think that's, oh, and then because there were so many flutists in St. Louis, I wasn't going to be, the hot ticket on the flute. We had a principal flute and a second flute and an assistant principal flute and a teacher, another teacher that performed around, and they had all been in St. Louis longer than, some of them longer than I was old. So I wasn't about ready to break in as the resident flutist. But also, I really liked the piccolo, and I wanted to be able to perform with the symphony orchestra anything other than the three Vivaldis that I played for the first 11 years, for the first 8 years, 11 times. That's all I was able to do. That made me think that I ought to get music written specifically for piccolo. So I did, and we now have the Lieberman Concerto and a number of other concertos, and the piccolo, especially in Europe, has become a solo instrument that that performs only piccolo music. He doesn't perform flute music and piccolo, but he performs piccolo music. Well, nobody would publish the first couple of ones that I commissioned, because nobody had ever heard of doing that for piccolo. Nobody liked the piccolo. We were the black sheep of the family. So I started a publishing company called Meridian Publishing. If you look on internet on that, you'll find the publications that I finally put out. Lost a lot of money, but at least we have a lot of really great music. Spindrift and oh golly, now I'm having a blank, but you look it up. It's all there. That was so long ago. So anyway, I think that's the bit. Now, I want to talk about why the piccolo is different than the flute. We call it a small flute. A piccolo is, means small. It doesn't mean anything else in Italian. It means small. And kleine Flöte is a small flute. Well, it isn't. And here are the differences. And I think nobody took these differences into account when they started performing on the instrument. The flute is a cylindrical bore instrument with a conical head, a two-parabola conical head. The piccolo is a conical bore with a cylindrical head. And you go, yeah, sure, fine, whatever. But it isn't whatever. That's what made that D in the Beethoven flat, and made the E kind of nowhere where we can find it, and the C sharp incredibly sharp, and so forth and so on. Not being able to play an F, not being able to play an F sharp or a G sharp very well. As we all know, we had to use a different fingering for G sharp, or it just simply wouldn't play. And I started thinking that this isn't right, that acoustically there has to be a way that Boehm's system of sound and mathematics would translate into conical board instruments. And why did I think this? Because everybody previously to 1847 or 1849, when Boehm came out with his system and Louis Lott started making silver flutes, everybody in major orchestras was playing on a wooden flute, which was a conical board instrument. and yet they weren't terribly out of tune. Although they were a little out of tune, as you can read in the Mahler books. In his autobiography, he was always a little upset with the flute and the intonation of the flute. But then again, he was upset with the trumpets too. So you know, we're in good company. So in doing so, I started fooling around. Now remember, there was and the second flute of the St. Louis Symphony had a little book, which a lot of people had in piccolo, where they wrote down fake fingerings. Well, I got real upset with that. That's like going up to a mature woman and saying, "Hi, sweetie," or "Hi, sugar plum." You know, I was offended. It isn't a fake fingering. It's a fingering that does one of three things. And this was my mantra. You had to be able to produce a beautiful sound. It had to be in tune, and it had to blend. And then the other three absolute rules is intonation, intonation, and intonation, not location. So with that in mind, I started fooling around with these fingerings, and at first I called them primary. At first I called them, what do I call them? Preferred fingerings. But as I went on and as I learned them, and I have many examples of how they really work, I took the leap and said primary. The primary fingering of D, ledger line, is thumb 2 3 4 2 3 4 in the right hand, not the flute fingering thumb 2 3 4 or 2 3. And with that and practicing it, all of a sudden the Beethoven became a piece of cake. I never had to sweat bullets on that ever again. One little story. Zart Domborianibi, who had started Flute Talk, was the first editor of Flute Talk, then went off to the Seattle Symphony and became a flutist and the piccolo player, piccolo specialist. I got a call during intermission on one of my concerts, and Zart was saying, oh my God, the Beethoven is so easy. Thank you so much for the book. Bye. And then she hung up. That was Zart. The piccolo player in Detroit, and now his name skips my mind just for a second.
Jeff Zook.
That's right, Jeff Zook used my book on the stand when he took the audition. So I know this works, and it makes the piccolo easy to play and makes it a solo instrument with a great deal of passion, a great deal of beauty in the sound. And that was the second one, how to get a big, full, rich sound down on the E and the D without that whistle. We used to play that low D, and no matter what you did, it had a whistle on it. It just wouldn't be a clear sound. Well, how can you have an oboe player, you know, playing these gorgeous melodies, and then you have to come in, you know, and blend with him, and you got a squeak, you've got this little whistle going on. So I talked with Burkhart, and there's a whole long story about how I kind of came to her with a chip on my shoulder because I was so upset. I got to clean up my language. I said, I need a head joint that plays. And she listened to me. She was the first and only one that listened to me. And she hand carved on that head joint and gave it back to me. I played it and I said, oh, this is better, but I still need yada yada. She carved some more. There it was. I could do anything. And the low D was rich and full, and I could put a lot of air into it. I took that head joint And I said, I'll buy it. And she says, oh, no, you can't buy that. That's a demonstration model. And I took the head joint and I put it in my pocket and I said, how much? And I gave her a check right then and there. I wouldn't let her have it back. That was the first head joint, and that started the R&D on the piccolo. And now the final thing before questions. On the piccolo, I don't think I'm giving up any proprietary information, but Burkhart found that if you make a slight parabola in the bore, inside the bore, and she knows exactly where to put it, and that's proprietary. Even I don't know that. It opened up the instrument. And that's when she started making the series 25, XX5. Can you all see this? The XX5 piccolo. And it's astounding because it follows the rules of acoustics, and it makes piccolo playing a lot easier. If and when you get the book, and I think you should, only because I can't teach it to you and you have to learn it because it's all different. It's learning different fingerings, a lot of cross fingerings, which Bayham's system on the flute didn't have because it was long enough and he had different kinds of mechanisms. But the piccolo, you can't put that much metal on it. It's just too small. Anyway, try the solo at number 6 of the 6th Symphony of Shostakovich. It is the first time that the entire melody is stated in one 8-bar phrase, and it's given to the piccolo. It starts out with the cellos doing a 3 or a 4 note motive, and then it kind of builds and builds and builds, and by the time you get to the 6th, the piccolo plays the entire thing. Well, when you get up into that 3rd octave, it is so awkward, and it bounces around, and you can't slide from one to another. But with my fingerings, you can. And if you learn every one of the fingerings and then play the solo and just work on it until it becomes part of you, you can make that work for yourself, and it will absolutely sell you on the idea that the primary fingerings of the piccolo are the ones that you pick in the book that are better than the piccolos that you think, the fingerings that you think should work because you're a flutist. Well, how was that?
Jan, that was great. Thank you, sir. Excuse my coughs, guys. So for those of you who aren't aware, Jan keeps on referencing a book, and his book is called The Complete Piccolo, and that really is the definitive work on studying the piccolo. For those of you, again, who are not aware of that book, I'm going to show you a few fingerings that he's allowed me to share with you guys. Okay, so here's an example from his book. So we're starting off on just A sharp or the B flat right above the staff. Jan, do you want to walk us through what they're seeing in front of them?
Now the one that he, oh good, you got it from the actual publication of the book. Great. See, I wrote about this in Flute Talk and I made a huge error. Or actually the person that set it up for printing made a huge error. On the one note that started the whole safari of, was that D, that ledger line D, the fingering was messed up, so nobody could understand it. And it was brought to my attention by Wally Kujala. He says, Jan, that just doesn't work. And I've tried it, and it doesn't work. Sure enough, it didn't work because the one key was, it was marked incorrectly which keys should be pushed down. As you see, there is primary, and the D says thumb 2 3 2 3 4. Now, in the beginning of the book, I show the way in which I write these numbers. Wally Kujala was a master at taking his pencil and filling in, making a template of the piccolo fingerings and coloring in pencil the keys that were to be depressed. And that's very good visually, but you can't talk about it. I mean, you can't say, well, the second finger on the left hand is the A. So what I did was use Arabic numbers. The thumb, as you see, is T. Then you will see a flat. That means the thumb on the B flat key. Everybody who's played piccolo knows what that is. Then on the left hand, 1, 2, 3, 4. And on the right hand, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm sorry. So the D, instead of being thumb 2, 3, 4, is now 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes it's difficult to get. You just have to practice it. But once you get the instrument to respond and your lip to focus properly, you will find that that note is completely in tune. But here's one caveat. You're all very fine flute players. And that's the other difficulty with piccolo, is that you come to an instrument and you sound like a fifth grader in the first band that he ever played in when you play piccolo, and yet you're an accomplished flute player and have been awarded a lot of accolades for that. A lot of people then just say, I'm not going to do this. I don't want to sound funny. Well, I agree with you. It's difficult. But the point is, if you've tried to play the piccolo in tune, you probably have squeezed your lip or squeezed other parts of your body to get those flat notes up, and then you've turned in real hard to make sure that the sharp notes aren't. When you use this book, don't do that. Just start with your A that you always play. Don't do anything else but play the note and the way you would without squeezing or anything, but use the fingering and see how the fingering is in tune, and you don't have to compensate for an intonation difficulty.
Hey, Jan.
Yeah.
I know that a few people are trying to kind of grab screenshots of these pages. There's just a few pages that you had allowed me to show up here. Are these pages, is it acceptable? There's 6 of them here. Can I send these out with the notes when we're done today?
Well, sure you can, because the Complete Piccolo, can you share this with everybody? Do you see it?
Hang on. Let me get out of my screen share. Here you go.
Okay. Because although that is the primary reason I would like you to understand, I also have a complete trill chart, which Morgan, I can't remember his first name now, and he tragically died too young. Morgan Williams helped me put it together. I had all the trills, but he did all the research on all the crazy trills. So he's got it's really worth the book too. Just that. Then you have a history of the piccolo that Terry Wacker, a DMA piccolo player, and she teaches at the University of Indiana in Pennsylvania. Have you ever heard that crazy kind of, yeah. Anyway, she teaches there, and I asked her to put in the history because I was, playing a gig. Then piccolo repertoire, you have an entire list of all the piccolo music, piccolo alone, piccolo and piano is one, two, three, four, five, 6.5 pages. Piccolo with strings, include trios, including keyboard, quartets, quintets, piccolo with percussion. It goes on and on. It's all in here. That's why we called it the Complete. Now, I am in touch with the publisher, and every time we get a new piece, we try to put it in here, but it skyrocketed. It absolutely became a snowball. And there are more piccolo pieces out there than we've been able to put in this, because we can't just keep making additions. We have to wait until that's sold before Theater Press will put out another edition. They're all over. One other thing I wanted to show you about how important the piccolo really was. I don't think any of you have seen this.
Jan, let me share that on the
So
screen.
put it up. And let me explain. I got a Xerox copy of a little tune that was written by Palen on the piccolo. And I got it from, she taught at the New England Conservatory, Paula Robeson. And she didn't know where she got it, but she had found it, and she said, well, I did a whole bunch of research and I found the book that it came from. Listen to this. There was a Mrs. Dyer, D-Y-E-R, Mrs. James Dyer, I guess you would pronounce it. I don't know what she was, or she must have been a big patron of the arts, because they held a party for her, a salon party, and Darius Milhaud, Albert Roussel, Jacques Ibert, George Aruc, Francois Poulenc, Fernand, and Henry Martelli all wrote small little pieces. Why don't you let me show them this. They wrote small little pieces with the piano part in it. They can't be more than 1.5 minutes, if that. They all wrote for the piccolo. It is to me, it is just a wonderful testament to these composers who knew how to write something very nice for the piccolo,
and
to
Jan,
be honored by for this woman's birthday.
And Jan, what is that called, and where can they find that if they'd like to find that?
Well, now, here is the letter that I got.
Hold it up a little higher. There you go.
Okay, and it says La Flute de Pan, and it comes from La Flute de Pan, 49 Rue de Rome, 75008, Paris. Now, this is the only thing about things like this. I got it in 1999. Okay? So we're 11 years ago. Are they still there? I hope so, but I know there are some books left over somewhere. They haven't all sold out, that I know. But hopefully you can get it. And the book is called, who knows French real well? Papier Melodies. Pipeaux. Melodies. Oh, for heaven's sakes, it's a Loisier edition. And Loisier is at 122 Rue de Grenelle, Grenelle in Paris. Voiselier was the one that published Mozart in France. So it's been around for a long time. Anyway, it's just It's an anomaly, but it is really beautiful. You'll love them, and they're great as encore pieces. Although I also have a book that I put together of encores for piccolo and piano or string, so that you could play it after a concerto with an orchestra or a piano after a piccolo recital.
Jan, would you address band directors, folks that are needing to start piccolo players, flute teachers, whomever that might involve? How does a teacher or director identify a good candidate for the piccolo? We talked about this, and what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, you know, in the very Jewish way of asking a question to answer a question, how do you identify a kid that wants to play trumpet? Well, the optimum word is wants to. So he gets a trumpet. You'll have good flute players, and they'll have an affinity for flute, but they don't know anything about the piccolo, and they're scared about the piccolo. It's so small, so tiny, and it's so shrill, and so forth and so on. Just get them an appropriate instrument, and we can go in on that in a minute, and let them try it, and show them some of the fingerings that will help with intonation. And those that have an affinity for it will just start playing it and love it. Those that don't won't. However, and this is one of my absolute rules. If you're going to be a flutist and you want to use it as your profession, such as being a teacher, being an educator in music, or being we don't call them pickup players anymore, but a jobber, we call it, when operas come through town. Or if you want to go to a symphony orchestra, you must have a piccolo. It's simply, it's just like it's just like owning a bassoon that's going to cost you $28,000 just to get in the door, and that's not even a heckle. And then you got to buy for $600 a a machine that helps you make a reed. And then you got to learn how to make the reeds, and you got to buy the reeds and so forth. So there's always add-ons. In flute, we don't have any of that. What we have is you get a flute and you have to have a piccolo, because you will always get paid more if you're a doubler, and you aren't always going to be a principal flutist. Sometimes to get up to being a principal flutist, you have to be a second flute piccolo or a third flute piccolo. And then if you really like it, you won't be entry level. Try a symphony orchestra, because the more you know about a piccolo, the better chance is you'll win the job.
Mm-hmm. So Jan, when do you think it's right to start a young flute player on piccolo, to allow them? Do they need to have a year of study under their belt, 2 years? Any guesses? Any
Yeah, piccolo is very hard to play well. I mean, you can play a Coke bottle, and then you could blow into a piccolo. But um, really, blowing into a head joint of a flute and then putting it on a flute and getting the student to understand the flute will give, and the fingerings and everything else about it will give a good head start. So maybe after 3 or 4 years, maybe just before junior high, introduce them to a quality piccolo that they can play for marching band, for concert band, and for orchestra.
Okay, so at least a couple of years under their belt where they're really solid with their embouchure and their control of the instrument. Another question. These were both from Laura Bach, who Laura is playing. She's out in Blue Valley School District in Kansas, and she's going to be playing piccolo. Correct me if I'm wrong, Laura. You're going to be playing piccolo with Heart of America Winds, right?
That's
Okay.
right.
So Jan and I are both
Hi, Laura.
on board. Jan and I are both on the board of the Heart of America Winds, which is a newly forming professional wind ensemble in Kansas City. And Laura has auditioned and earned the piccolo chair, which we're very excited for her about. And so her other question was, what are, aside from, in addition to, I should say, in addition to your performances, Jan, who do you recommend people learn from? What models should they emulate to sound like you and to sound like others? Who are your favorite players?
There are very few people that yet have endorsed the way in which I play, the way in which I get a sound, a big, rich, full sound, except for some of the recitalists. Um, and the reason for it is the piccolos that they're using, in my opinion. However, saying that, Erica Peel of the Philadelphia Orchestra is superb. Jennifer Gunn in Chicago is really, really good. They just play well. They play with vibrato. They play with blend. Their intonation is impeccable. You know, whenever you do this, you forget somebody. There is a there is another piccolo player.
How about Mazzanti or Mazzanati or whatever the name was?
Oh well, yeah, but he's a soloist, and I guess he plays with some orchestras, but he's in Italy. Well, I listened to his recordings, that's for sure. I
Yeah, I
don't
think
think
that's who
these
we're looking
women,
for. But
I don't think
recording.
these women have made recordings yet. It's tough to make a recording when you're in a symphony, unless you're a principal and get a lot of time off, you know. But uh, soldiers like the piccolo and the English horn and the bass clarinet got to show up every day to to get the check. We don't have extra holidays to prepare recitals and so forth. So recording has been difficult, but there is one other that I thought was just real. Oh, of course, in L.A. Oh my God, um, she was from Toronto. Oh, and you got me on
Sarah
the.
Jackson.
I'm sorry. Say again.
Is it Sarah Jackson?
Sarah Jackson. Thank you. She is sensational. I heard her at one of the NFA conventions and I just cheered. There was somebody out there that believed the way I believe. And Erica came along later. So yeah, I would say those people for sure, only because I haven't heard a whole bunch of others.
Wonderful. And Jill, you also recommended, where was that? Is it Gudrun? Is that how you pronounce that? Gudrun? Gudrun? You're on mute. Jill, you're on mute.
Can't hear you, Jill.
There
Um,
you go.
she has had a number of pieces written for her and some concertos, and she's a unbelievable, beautiful player. Because I spend my summers in Europe,
What's
I'm
her
more
name?
exposed. I'm trying to remember Gudrun's last name.
Oh,
Oh my
good.
goodness.
I
I'm sorry.
imagine if somebody looked up Gudrun and Piccolo, they'd be able to find
Yeah,
her.
I
Yeah, and I've had a lot of contact with Mazzanti, and he's really terrific. He does play full-time orchestra and opera in Italy,
oh,
and so he's really terrific.
the last time I had conversation with him, he wasn't performing at that time, but I saw him at the convention, and he was very gracious to me for the work that I had done, because he just picked it up and flew with it. He's really terrific. Um, there was one other that I just thought of. Oh yeah, in Cleveland. Um,
Mary Kay Fink.
say again.
Is it Mary Kay Fink?
Yeah, Fink, Mary Kay, yeah. She performed the Broughton Concerto, the only other one to have performed it with a major symphony orchestra. I never got that chance. I did the Lieberman, but I never got around to doing the Broughton with the St. Louis Symphony, but she did, and I was allowed to get a tape of that, and she's brilliant. Katie, oh my golly, her mother was the first winner at the NFA flute young artist competition. Katie, and she's in California and down in San Diego area. It's a very famous family, and I'm afraid that I can't remember things that has to do with having lost some memory because of some surgeries. But Schwab or Staub or something like that, because she got married, and I can't remember her married name. Anyway, she has a couple of albums out, and on one of those albums, she's playing Wally Kujala's, no, not Wally, Steve Kujala's piece, Eurythmionics. And when I talked with Wally about Eurythmionics, it was written by his son, Steve. Steve had written the piece, and it was called Take Your Pick. And it was a cute little piece. And then we said to him, why don't you really expand it and make a piece? I was commissioning it. And he said, sure, he would do it for his dad. And his dad premiered it. But in there, in the second to the last page, there is 2 to 4 measures which are impossible. I practiced those. I can't tell you the amount of time I practiced to be able to play the piece, and I played it in recital 3 or 4 times. Wally, and then I finally called up Wally and I said, what do you do with that? Because he had written an Ossia part for those 4 measures. And he said, oh, I just play the Ossia. And I said, oh, great. I won't feel so bad if that's what I have to do. I didn't want to do that. I just didn't want to do it. So I finally got through them. But I'm telling you, to this day, it's digging a ditch. It's really difficult. Katie made the recording, and it's a piece of cake. She plays it like she was born with it. And I just said, I've been eclipsed. There is no way I could play it with so much aplomb and technique. And yet I thought I was pretty good at technique. But no, the newer kids are coming up with these pieces, and they have far surpassed us. But if you ever want something really terrific, Eurythmionics is one of the best.
Well, you know you're doing your job when the people who follow you can eclipse you. I mean, that's your role, is to other people stand on your shoulders. You know, we want that as teachers. We want our students to be better than we are.
I appreciate that. And Katie has also been very complimentary to me. Her mom is a great flutist, and she is as much as a talent.
Jan, can you describe to us, for those of us who are not flutists, I'm a saxophone player, by the way. Sorry, guys. Thanks for letting me in on the flute and piccolo discussion.
Just this once.
Just this once. I get kicked out of all kinds of rooms as a saxophone player. Talk to us about the difference between flute embouchure and piccolo embouchure, and how we as educators can describe that to our students. What are some words you can use?
Yeah, well, you know, in becoming a professional musician, you come out of a conservatory like a fresh racehorse, and you can do one thing really well. You can look great, and you can fly like the wind. Finesse comes with age and wisdom. The flute is the only instrument that doesn't have a control, an external control. Trumpets have mouthpieces, double reeds have double reeds, clarinet has a reed, violins have a bow. But the flute uses only the mouth and the air that can be produced and flows through it. That makes the air as important as the reed or the bow. Anyone know about torque bows? They go for $175,000, just the bow. And there are people that swear by them and say, I can't play it if I don't have that. They got a Strat or they've got an Amati. No, they don't have Amatis. Whatever they're called. But the bow is that important. When you play the flute, you can't squeeze your embouchure. And I have a whole technique where you have to stand straight and your shoulder blades, you pull in your shoulder blades and you breathe with your entire torso full. You hold it and then you allow it to go by pushing the muscles around the chest area and the diaphragm, and you learn to make it a homogeneous sound. When you play the piccolo, you are now, and by the way, a flute is what, about 3 feet long or 2.5 feet long, something like that. I used to know this stuff. And a piccolo is 18 inches, 17 to 18 inches. Its bore is half the size of a flute bore. You can take a piccolo head joint and put it in a flute bore to a point. So you've got to use your air column. You've got to diminish it, and you've got to have more airspeed without squeezing here, which is what we want to do. We want to squeeze and spit the way a trumpet player squeezes to get his lips to vibrate. So the difference is that you have to keep loose and relaxed, but you have to have a smaller aperture, but you can't crush that aperture. That's the best I can do in describing it without demonstrating and teaching it. It's just one of those things where it has to do with balance. Mm-hmm. It just has to do with balance. You've seen those people that put big, huge baskets on their head and they walk with a basket full of food. How do they do that? They've learned how to balance. And that's what you have to do on piccolo. And that's one of the reasons why it's more difficult also, is because getting the quality of sound you want is contraindicated to the size of the instrument.
So, Jan, there's a few more questions we need to get to. We're going to have to wrap it up in about a little less than 10 minutes. But I know folks are asking for tips on types of piccolos to get for their classrooms.
Okay.
And you and I talked about resin would be probably the best option, right?
Yeah, I'll get into that. Now, since we've got to move along, and I don't have time to give you the whole PhD notes on this, or DMA, metal piccolos don't work. Why? Because they exacerbate all the difficulties that the piccolo has. They have a smaller bowl. Sometimes they're most of them are cylindrical. You can get a conical metal piccolo, but when you blow into it, you're going to get a shrill, loud, piercing sound. That's what they're made for. The wooden piccolo is a conical bore piccolo without a lip plate, but with a hole that's dug into it, the embouchure, so that the wall is a little bit more accurate. And when the air hits wood or anything like wood that isn't metal, it has a different flow. You know that the air, when you hit, goes counterclockwise down the tube. It flows differently. For expense and for playing outdoors and marching, a good resin piccolo is fine as long as it's resin all the way through and it's in the complete wooden style, no metal head joints. When you get with that and you want to go up, there are student piccolos around that you can get. Yamaha makes it, and they're very good for what they do. Then, when you want to be a professional, you've only got 3 or 4 of them. Burkhardt, absolute. Powell, okay. Haynes is better than it used to be. And, the guy that used to work for Brannon.
Jim Keefe.
Keefe, you should be doing this. You know more than I do.
Nah.
Keefe, although he and I had a big, long discussion, and he doesn't believe anything I have to say about the construction of a piccolo. That's why it doesn't play very loud. But it's a very well-made instrument. Oh, Nagahara is used to work for Burkhardt, and I still have one of his piccolos. He's a fabulous workman, and his instruments are good. Stay away from the low B instrument. He's really tried to make it work acoustically, and it does, except when you get to the high range, it blows out. You can't do any of the traditional work on that instrument. But boy, for Mahler, it's magnificent. You know, when the Mahler goes down to low C, or Barber's opera, Peter Herring. Is it Peter Herring? Yeah, I think so. I think that's the name of the opera. There's a huge piccolo solo in that opera, but it goes down to a low C. And I had to find a way to do it, and I did, and that's another story. But I had to use a different piccolo to do it.
Jan, we've also found that the Dejau piccolos a lot of folks are liking the Dejau piccolos now.
That's right, and this is something I don't know. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, I've been out of the biz for a while and really out of touch with humanity for a while, and I'm glad to be here. But that one we found was the best price for a resin piccolo. It's going to be about $500-600. But then again, if you're going to get yourself a flute to be a professional flutist, you're starting at $3,000 and you can go up to $10,000, and that's just sterling silver. That's not counting the 14-karat golds and yada yada.
Jan, is it okay for me to share your email with everybody on here so that they can reach out and ask questions?
Oh, sure, I'd love it.
Okay. Jan Gippo at Gmail, right?
Yeah. And if you'd like to give me your telephone number, I'm better at talking than I am at writing emails, because emails, at least I have not been able to make emails subtle. You know, there are subtle shades of differences. And when you state something in print, all of a sudden it becomes, it becomes law. And that's not the case. That was the case when I was writing for Flute Talk. I would write something about how to phrase this one phrase, and I would always have to put in the disclaimer: this is what I believe. Mm-hmm. This is not written in stone when it comes to the choice of how you're supposed to interpret something. And there are other things where I'm just absolute about, and I feel absolute about, and I'm sure you guys do too.
Absolutely.
And we might differ on that. But so if you want to talk with me, as you can tell, I talk a lot better than I could write.
So there's a few things that we need to get to before we're going to have to wrap it up. I just want to reiterate the piccolo brands that Jan was just sharing, the Burkhardt, and I can't remember some of the other ones you were saying just then, but those were the upper level ones. Yeah. When we were talking about the student level ones, we were listing Yamaha, we were listing Dejau, Pearl. There were a couple different options on those.
Yeah, Gemeindhard also makes one, but make sure that it's not the one that Roy Seaman makes, because unless you want it, but when you're going to get that pricey, you may as well go up to one that also makes the body, hand makes the body.
Mm-hmm. And Jill was commenting that Haynes is no longer making piccolos at this
Right.
time.
Oh, is that
Canyon.
right?
Yeah, I called them because I needed a head joint fixed for one of the school piccolos, and they said they may start up again, but they don't make them anymore. I was completely shocked. I want to say that lately I've come across some phenomenal Gemeinhardt Storm rosin piccolos that I've had my kids buy. They're around $1,200. You can also get it with the wood head joints for use inside, and I have found for that price range, most of them, anything that plays is around $900 up. And so I found that that has been the best, and they're very, very happy with it, especially if they're not going to be professional players, and they can always stick a wood head joint on it. Do you want me to tell you about that piccolo festival that people can listen to?
Yes, please go ahead and share that with us real quick before we wrap up.
All right. Nicola Mazzanti, if you go to Facebook and you go to the International, if you like, the International Piccolo Festival, 3 times a week, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturdays. Nicola always does Saturdays, and I believe they're archived. Last Thursday, I heard a phenomenal hour talk from Erica Peel. She talked about her warm-ups. Everybody picks a different topic, and they talk about things. They put on exercises that you can do. They'll answer questions at the end, and players from all around the world. Mindy Kaufman was on. They had people from all over the U.S., all over Europe. It's really been amazing that 3 times a week you can get these phenomenal piccolo classes going on.
Absolutely.
Uh,
That's really great, Jill.
Yeah,
the
that's
other the other thing I wanted to tell Jan, two quick things, is Jan and I were at NEC together. Jan was a lot older than I was. And I was just a freshman or something. But we both studied with Lois Schaefer at the time. And Lois, I had, quote, a warm sound. And so she gave me one of her piccolos to play to really help me focus my tone. And I find that now with my college kids, I'll have them play piccolo to help them with their tone a little bit. And I think it really made a difference. But I have to tell you, Jan, that she finally made me buy the piccolo that I had for like a zillion years. And when I decided that I was so tired of using every fake fingering known to man, I bought a Burkhart piccolo, and Mary Kay Fink in Cleveland bought it from me.
wonderful.
That's
That's
so
wonderful to know.
fun.
Lois was so great. She allowed piccolo play. She did have one student who I will not name, who used her piccolo for about 4 or 5 years and never bought it and gave it back to her uh, without even having it completely overhauled. But that was the only one that I saw abuse what she did. She would give any one of her students a piccolo if they needed it because she believed in educating you. And she was a wonderful person and a very fine teacher. She's passed, and I'm really sorry about that. Yeah. Yeah. And Dory O'Dwyer passed also, and she was in Lawrence, which is 40 miles from here, because her daughter teaches Japanese at the University of Kansas, KU.
Well, Jan, thank you so much for your expertise and your wisdom with us and your stories. It was really great to hear you talking and kind of getting in the weeds about some of the real details about how some different out. So again, folks, you have Jan's email in the notes, and we'll send you a link to the recording. So that'll be either later today or maybe over the weekend sometime. So if you have friends that were unable to join us today, please feel free to send that on. Maybe jump on the Facebook page that Jill mentioned about the International Piccolo Festival. I put that in the link. We want to say thank you to Palen Music Center for supporting us and doing these sessions. We're so grateful to be able to try to reach out to folks in different and new ways. And thank you so much for spending an hour with us this afternoon. Yeah, I think that's about all I need to say to you. So happy Friday to everybody. Jan, thank you very, very much.
Well, thank you, and thank Palen Music for doing this. This is wonderful, and Jill, what a delight! That was just the delight of the day.
I'll try to contact you. I'll try to contact you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. To see a former classmate and to know that you've done so well. I'm very proud of you.
Pretty wonderful. Happy Friday, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.